I'm fully aware that there are still 4 teams in this round of the tournament, and every one of them can win. However, I pose a question: can any team halt the progress of PSG? They feel like a freight train coming down the track. Andy?
They do, and they are, and they certainly did in the first 25 minutes at Arsenal. I thought they were outstanding in that, really. And you know that old cliche about take the sting out of the atmosphere. I mean, they really did that. I know Arsenal fans have got a lot of stick for the atmosphere, but I think really when you have built up to this moment and then PSG don't just put a pin in your balloon, they stamp in it and put it in the recycling as well. That they are just saying to you, right, okay, we know that we're good, but we're just going to show you how good, and we're going to show you how good and how lucky you are to even have a chance in this tie, because they are all over Arsenal for that. Now, of course, one of the best ways to sap atmosphere from an English crowd is just keep the ball. Stop the home team getting the ball forward, and that's exactly what they did. So look, I've every sympathy for the way those Arsenal fans reacted, because you're sat there, and everyone was sat there, like 60,000 plus people in the stadium were sat there going, "Shit, these are good." And how are we going to get the ball back? Do we need to bring another ball? It was that kind of thing, really. And I think particularly the way the front three set the tone in that game. Now we've said time and time again, our PSG were never going to win the Champions League with Messi, Neymar and Mbappe up front. So they picked Doué, who's having an unbelievable time at the moment, instead of Barcola, as you would expect, Kvaratskhelia and Dembele. And the way they are on and off the ball, it's like if someone said, for example, give me your elevator pitch on how you're going to win the Champions League. And it's the three of them going, okay, this is what we can do. It was a perfect explanation of their candidacy. And walking away from that and seeing the way they did the game differently in the second half when Arsenal tried to turn it up, the way they defended, they showed so many different sides to them in the same game. Okay, it was nowhere near as thrilling as the game last night, but I come away from this thinking these are the clear favourites for this competition.
Yeah, that's a sensibility. If anything, that second half performance makes you feel even more confident about that.
I agree.
Considering what you've got to remember PSG's history in this tournament, the meltdowns that they've had. They have melted, and then you've also had a meltdown.
The meltdown that they nearly had in the last round.
Exactly.
And that was a question they had to answer, because ever since they got that going over at Villa Park, they've not quite looked the same. They've looked a little bit vulnerable. Now, I saw them on Friday night when they played at home to Nice. Now, of course, they lost their Ligue unbeaten record, so they can no longer do the unbeaten season. They can no longer match Nantes' start of 32 games unbeaten that they achieved like 30 years ago. But it was funny. The most concerning thing about it was not the way they played, because they absolutely battered Nice. And Nice had 3 shots on target. But it was quite interesting. Now, Luis Enrique had picked the exact team that he was going to take to Arsenal, when most people assumed there was going to be rotation, so he could keep his players fresh and all the rest of it. And he's like, no, this is serious. This is dress rehearsal. And in fact, they go back to doing what they were doing in autumn, run all over teams and find a way to lose the game. And it's something they managed to do in the Champions League a couple of times as well, notably against Atletico and Liverpool. And I wonder actually if that Friday night against Nice sort of done them the world of good against Arsenal, because they approach it like similarly to the way they do after having a similar experience against Liverpool. They went to Anfield and they're like, right, okay, let's get on top of these and score early. And it's exactly what they do at Arsenal as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it just lets the other team know what they're dealing with. And it was the manner. It's like Andy said, 26, 27 pass move. And when you put that on somebody, And it really, so it's like, wow.
At their place as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you just know that then you're in a game. And I don't know, we didn't learn anything new about PSG. If you look, I think the last time I was on, and we discussed this as well, what's, again, so admirable about this PSG team is just how adaptable, how flexible they are as a team. Different ways that they can get at you, different ways that they can defend. And it's something, funnily enough, that Luis Enrique has had against him a lot in his career, in that you've only got one way of playing. Or you've got all these superstars, you've only got one way of playing. What happens when you fall behind? What's your plan B? I think you've shown you've got a plan B, C, D with PSG, which again adds to them, makes them more dangerous. I think Arsenal will, of course, give a game of it in the second leg, because I think they'll be disappointed with their first leg performance as well. I think they'll look at it and say, right, we need to come out of our shells a bit more. And I know Arteta said about seizing the moment. You know, you only get one chance at this kind of, you know, to be at this stage. They have to go for it a bit more. But the danger is, again, what PSG can bring on the break. So this is, unlike the other tie, I think this one is very lopsided. I think this is very highly favoured towards PSG.
Although we saw towards the end of the match, Dembele come off, and as Andy's already said, crucial part of that front attack for PSG. Do Arsenal, well, clearly they stand a better chance without Dembele, I would have thought.
Of course. Oh, yeah, he's a major player for them. He's been their best player this season, of course. It's a major one, but, you know, Barcola can come in. That front three is very interchangeable. No one's pigeonholed into, you know, they might say to Kvara, oh, we're going to stick Barcola on the wing here.
And will they still be as invincible with Barcola?
I think so. I think they're still...
Sorry to use the invincible thing.
look at these numbers this season in Ligue 1. And this is a guy who had a lot of pressure on him as well, more than most, because of Mbappe going and him stepping in, and he's delivered. And I think he's going to be a major player. I know the Doué coming through has maybe took people's eyes off Barker a little bit, but Barker is still a very, very good player, and you do not still want to be facing him 1v1 situations. You don't want to leave him that opportunity, because he will, you know, take you apart. So it's going to be a really, really interesting game.
I still think he turns into a 30-goal-a-season player.
100%.
I reckon he gets there. I mean, you forget how early he is in his development, really. But I think in terms of where Arsenal can, I mean, I would expect Dembele to play anyway in the second leg, unless he can't stand up, he's playing. You know, it's a vital game for them, and I think he'll play. I think, though, if there's a way that Arsenal can get at them, the clue is between what happened at Villa Park and what happened at the Emirates this week. Because, like I said, PSG have looked very secure defensively. They were not so much like in the games between that. Like they conceded goals to Nantes and Le Havre, and like that definitely shouldn't be happening. By the way, no matter how good they are and how much they've got their mind on other things. And I think it's interesting because we talked about Inter maybe being a quite nice match for Barcelona in a way. You could actually make the reverse argument for Arsenal for PSG, because, you know, we talked about how, and lots of people talked about how there are no like sort of traditional strikers going into this tie. I think that slightly favours Arsenal, because essentially the players who've scored goals, and that's before we start back at Villa Park in the second leg with McGinn, who's able to run unmolested for like 25 yards before he whacks one in, and he's got clear sight of goal. Before we talk about Yuri Tielemans scoring in that game, almost all the players who've scored against PSG in that run up until this clean sheet Arsenal, they're all midfielders who run late into the box. And that is one thing that Arsenal might have. Now, I think, without wanting to disrespect Leandro Trossard, he's not an elite level centre forward. I think it's fair to say. But I think once you get Thomas Partey back, once you're able to, and I thought Declan Rice was excellent, but once you're able to get him 15 yards further up the pitch, I think Arsenal could have something to say. That is the bit where, if there's one, like, PSG's greatest strength is holding on to the ball, but it's given to them by something that could be their biggest weakness. The fact that they don't have that kind of number 6 dedicated stopper, really. You know, that Vitinha organises the game by circulation of the ball, really.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they've been there before with Verratti, although Verratti is, a much more reliable fouler and ratbag, I think it's fair to say. But I think there's a possibility for Arsenal to get there. You look at the fact that on that game against Nice, where Nice had no chances and still managed to win 3-1, who scores the opening 2 goals? Morgan Sanson, who, was probably not quite good enough for Marseille, didn't make it at Aston Villa, makes 2 late runs into the box and scores 2 brilliant goals. You're not telling me that Declan Rice can't do that?
No, so one of Arsenal's best chances came through that Rice burst.
Yeah.
He picked it up on the edge of his area, just in front of it. And he had a little run through, and I think he slipped in. I think it was Trossard who he slipped in, and he had a great chance through that. So if they have more runners like that, then we'll see. I know we're up against it here to move on and what have you. Just one more thing I wanted to touch upon, because I think they've been great all season, but PSG's fans, they're just incredible once again. I thought. And they are the same as...
What's with the dark glasses? They all seem to be wearing dark glasses as well.
Great. I like
Don't get caught on security cameras.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great look. But yeah, they were incredible again. And I said this to a mate when I was watching the game. I think, you look at the big clubs, the elite clubs, I think it's sometimes a bit missing when it comes to fans and what have you like that. But I always think out the elite clubs, I'd probably say them, and Bayern's fans just always seem to be really at it. Yeah,
and I think what we have to say about the Champions League as well is it's a season's effort, not just a knockout round effort. And let's remember that those same PSG fans were at Salzburg away in December with their shirts off.
Yeah.
Salzburg in December with their shirts off. I cannot emphasise enough how cold that is.